Hey everyone, so last week then I got back into cutting after my finger injury. It's still not perfect and we're still getting there, but last week went pretty well. So we're going to get back into it this week as well. So I'm going to be doing rokudan-giri today. And what rokudan-giri is it literally translates to 6 cuts. And it's a cutting pattern that has 6 cuts in it. And the reason why I chose this pattern is because you can do the cuts at your own pace, and so it means that I don't have to have any fast movements or try and catch a falling piece and cut that as it falls. So we'll see how we go with that. Alrighty, so that went pretty well. You can see that 5 out of 6 cuts went pretty well. One of them was not perfect. It's still cut, but there's plenty to work on. Alrighty, so those cuts weren't perfect, but they cut through. They weren't too hard. Now there's something that I've been wanting to try for quite some time, and that is to make a pool noodle harder to cut. And the reason for that is because where I live, tatami mats are incredibly expensive. They're just not worth buying. And so then the next step up is newspaper targets. Newspaper targets take quite some time to prepare. They're annoying. You have to go and scavenge newspapers. And now that I live with my bunny, then the newspapers get used for his litter. So making a way for the pool noodles to be hard to cut would be a good way for me to have a cheap, easy, efficient way so that I can make my cuts a little bit more difficult and have a better practice tool. So what I've done here is I've introduced a split. So as you can see, I've cut the pool noodle in half long ways. It's still attached to the bottom so it can be stuck onto the pole, but I want to see if this makes a difference. So I'm going to be doing this in 2 ways. The first way is with the split horizontal, so I'm cutting across the split, which I think will be easier than the other way, which is having the split this way, so I'm cutting it against the split. And my theory is that the split will allow the pool noodle to move a little bit more and absorb a little bit more of that shock. So we'll see what happens. So that test was me cutting across the split. And you can see that the pieces did cut, but honestly that felt a lot more difficult. And one of those cuts wasn't very clean at all. And while it still cut, then it felt like the pool noodle was trying to get away from me, and that if I slowed down for a second, then I wouldn't be able to cut through. So now we're going to try the split in the other orientation and see how that goes. Alrighty, so as expected, that was a lot more difficult than the other one. You can see from this piece, this is a piece that should have been cut through in the middle, and it only just scratched it because it moved out of the way to absorb the shock of the cut. And so you can see that it is actually a really good way to increase the difficulty of cutting pool noodles. It literally costs no more than buying the base pool noodle because you just cut a slit down it. And the orientation with the slit this way so that the cuts are moving it was much more difficult. And it's a significant challenge. It is quite a lot more difficult than the base pool noodle. So I think I'll be practicing like this for quite some time, because that was actually really fun. Anyway, I hope this was interesting and that it was informative. If you want to try cutting a slit down your pool noodles, give it a go. I think it's a really good exercise. Alrighty, with that, I'll see you next time.